Welcome to R&R Living Life. In this episode, Rick and I continue along the Capricorn Highway as we leave the charming little town of Jericho and make our way towards Alpha before crossing the Baliando River and on through the Drummond Range to Bogantungan and Anarchy. We camp in a gravel pit not far from Emerald and watch the spirit of the outback that makes its way back from Longreach to Rockhampton and then on to Brisbane through the heart of outback Queensland. The following day we make our way through Emerald to Springshaw, where we camp at Virgin Rock Campground. Jericho is one of those towns we had never stopped in, so now was a good opportunity to check it out as we were on adventure time. This tranquil and charming little town is situated on the banks of the Jordan River, south of Lake Galilee. It was originally named when the railway line reached the banks of the Jordan River in 1885, named after a pioneer of the area, Harry Jordan. Jericho, because of its biblical-sounding name, became connected with the story of Joshua and the walls of Jericho, with the crystal trumpeters in the main street created by local historians to tell the story of how Joshua won the Battle of Jericho. We checked out the billboard at the Jericho Drive-In, the smallest operating drive-in theatre in the Southern Hemisphere, with the latest release films showing once a month, but I am not sure how reliable the information was. Jericho also has a number of interesting and colourful murals painted by local residents, and all the streets are named after famous scientists. Alpha Station was established in 1863, just over 13 years since settlers had moved into the area, with the town named after the property. Known as the Gateway to the West, Alpha was established as a service town for railway construction workers. It is now a small service centre servicing the surrounding rural area, which is known as one of the richest cattle-raising areas in the state, although this may change in the future due to the discovery of large coal deposits being located in the heart of the Galilee Basin mining precinct. Located on the Capricorn Highway, its streets are named after poets, with the main street being Shakespeare Street. We were impressed to see the murals scattered around the town, said to be 26 or 27 in total, that paid tribute to the pioneers of the bush and the history of the district, new additions since we were here nearly 40 years ago. We were interested to see the impressive fossilised forest sculpture, with the exterior of the sculpture having interesting form, carvings and stone attachments to reflect the history of the prehistoric area in which petrified wood formed, the region being famous for its petrified wood. About 30 kilometres east of Alpha, a plaque not far from the Baliando River indicates where the first European to explore the area, Major Thomas Mitchell, passed through the area in the winter of 1846 on his fourth and last expedition. He reported that the area was characterised by rich grassy plains, fragrant tropical air, many trees in blossom, and flowers to deck the earth. The Baliando River, including the Baliando River Western Branch, is about 1,054 kilometres in length, and with a catchment area of 35,000 square kilometres, and is one of the longest rivers in Queensland. It is quite something when in flood, reaching its confluence with the Sutter River northeast of Glendon before flowing into Lake Dalrymple, also known as Burdekin Falls Dam, and joining the Burdekin River. In April 1990, when floodwaters inundated Charleville, Alfred, Jericho, Augathella and Blackall on the southern side of the Drummond Range, the Baliando that flows north at the station where we were living at the time was over 6 kilometres wide, flooding the horse yards, chicken and pig pens, and reaching the machinery sheds. Then again in 2010-2011, floods again in the Baliando caused widespread flooding along the river, isolating many properties and needing food supply drops. With cyclones that crossed the coast and degenerating into weather systems and severe rain events, it can be said that when it rains, it pours, often causing flooding. Since leaving Alpha and crossing the Baliando River, we were travelling through open acacia and eucalypt woodlands, interspersed with areas that had been cleared for improved pasture and dryland cropping. About 60 kilometres east of Alpha, we crossed through the Drummond Range, part of the Great Dividing Range that sits at 451 metres above sea level. About 265 to 235 million years ago, the Drummond Range formed when a crustal compression occurred, folding the sediments and uplifting the terrain. The range marks the divide between the Nagoa River or Fitzroy catchment and the Baliando River or Burdekin catchment areas. Along the sandstone hills of the dividing range were thickly vegetated acacia or eucalypt woodlands with a spinifex understory. It really was interesting country we were travelling through. Further to the east was Boguntungan, once a thriving railway town in the early 1880s, with 28 hotels, several churches, numerous businesses, sporting clubs and a racecourse. Sadly, there is very little left of what was once there. Boguntungan was the site of one of Queensland's worst train disasters in February 1960, when the Midlander passenger train heading east to Rockhampton passed over the flooded Midway Creek just west of the town. The bridge collapsed when the train was partially over and a number of carriages dropped into the water. Sadly, 4 passengers and 3 crew were killed and 43 people were injured. The Boguntungan Historical Railway Station has numerous interpretive panels and memorabilia about the crash, as well as the original refreshment room built between 1912 and 1924, with water tanks believed to have been built in 1916. Our next stop was in Anarchy, a town we had passed many times, but had never stopped in. Located at the Sapphire Gemfields crossroad along the Capricorn Highway, it is said to be the oldest town on the Gemfields, rich in history and gems. Being interested in history, we enjoyed the quaint railway station built in 1884 as part of the rail push into Western Queensland. Behind the station was a 130-year-old bottle tree engraved with the initials of the soldiers who were on their way to war from here. We camped in a gravel pit beside the railway just outside of Emerald and got to watch the spirit of the outback returning from Longreach. The following day we made our way to Emerald, a thriving rural service centre with a large number of farm machinery sales outlets, a huge irrigation dam, an airport, and was once home to the Emerald Agricultural College. Named not after the gem but for the lush green pasture that surrounded the town, Emerald was established in 1879 as a base to build the Western Railway. It was once a major sunflower producer, acknowledged by the world's biggest replica of Van Gogh's sunflower painting, measuring 25 metres high, located in Moreton Park. We passed the impressive National Trust listed railway station built in 1900 and restored in the mid-80s, featuring wrought iron lacework and pillared portico, while outside the town hall was a fossilised tree estimated to be 250 million years old. The tree was unearthed in 1979 when a new railway bridge was being built across the Mackenzie River for the Gregory mine. On the banks of the Nagoa River is the Regional Botanic Garden spanning 42 hectares and includes a rose garden, maze, bush chapel, sculptures, rainforest playground and a 6-kilometre walking and biking track. From Emerald we made our way 66 kilometres to Springsure along the Gregory Highway section of the Great Inland Way. Springsure is situated in a delightful valley with spectacular Mount Zamia and virgin rock overlooking the town. This rural town on the Dawson Highway was named after the Springsure Pastoral Station taken up by Sydney investors in 1860, including the New South Wales Registrar General Christopher Ralston. Virgin Rock Rest Area Campground, situated 4 kilometres from Springsure, is a large level campground near the base of Mount Zambia, a large rocky hill with a spectacular virgin rock, a naturally formed likeness to the Virgin Mary and Child. Overnight the temperatures plummeted, and in the morning the boat was covered in a nice sheet of frost. The only other morning we had had frost was at Calgara near the South Australian border, though Alice Springs did get down to near zero, but it wasn't frosty. The Gregory Highway enters the town from the north, while the Dawson Developmental Road enters from the west, becoming the Dawson Highway as it continues on through towards Rolleston. After we had defrosted the windscreen, we made our way through Springshaw and took the Dawson Highway to Rolleston, located on the Comet River, that has a long pastoral history. The area around Rolleston was first explored by Ludwig Leichhardt during his 1844-45 journey through central Queensland, and then again in 1846 by Sir Thomas Mitchell. Explorer William Landsborough then passed through the area in 1854. Nearby Springshaw Pastoral Station was established in 1860, with the town named after Christopher Rolleston, part owner of the station. Then, in 1871, the Rolleston State School was opened. The township of Rolleston is also famous for the notorious Patrick and James Kenneth, Queensland's last legendary cattle thieves and bushrangers, who overlanded cattle to the district in 1891 after being convicted of stock stealing in northern New South Wales. The notorious brothers frequently lived at Lethbridge Pocket, which is now within the Carnarvon National Park. They were the prime suspects when cattle disappeared from neighbouring properties and local squatters demanded their eviction. The Kenneths took up a nomadic life, riding armed through the district where they continued to steal cattle and horses, and even held up a general store at Yulbar. Then, on Easter Sunday 1902, the pair murdered Constable George Doyle and cattle station manager Albert Dolkey, whose bodies were later found burnt in a saddlebag of Constable Doyle's horse, along with some personal belongings belonging to Doyle and Dolkey. 3 months later, the brothers were captured in June 1902 at what is now known as Arrest Creek, south of Mitchell. The area around Rolleston is rich black soil country, producing a range of crops including sorghum, wheat and chickpeas. It is also known for its excellent cattle and the open-cut mine that began operations in 2005, located 16 kilometres west of the town. Rolleston lies at the junction of the Carnarvon, Gregory and Dawson highways. We took a walk around Beasley Park and checked out the historic Boundary Rider slab hut, Pearlbrook Hut, built in 1860s, now a memorial to the pioneers of the area that was moved into town from Pearlbrook property, before continuing our walk along the Heritage Walk, discovering the history behind some of the buildings around town. From Rolleston, we took the Carnarvon Highway towards Carnarvon Gorge. About 60 kilometres east of the town and just over Carnarvon Creek was the turn-off to the gorge. The drive out from Rolleston was interesting. I had heard about some of the pastoral properties in the area, but had never realised just how good the country was. I can't compare this area to any other that we had seen on our trip. Every place we have visited has been amazing, each with its own level of stunning. From the highway, the 40-kilometre drive into Carnarvon Gorge was stunning, with its rugged ranges full of towering peaks, winding creeks, and glorious views of sandstone cliffs and vibrantly coloured gorges. If this was what we were going to enjoy over the next couple of days, I will be in heaven. Not only were we seeing some of the best grazing country and prime Wagyu and Angus bulls, but the scenery was next level. I had heard about Carnarvon Gorge, but I don't think I had ever envisaged it to look like this. On the way into Carnarvon Gorge, we stopped at the Dakota C-47 Air Crash Memorial on Rewarn Station that commemorates the 5 American Army Air Force personnel, 7 Royal Australian Air Force personnel, and 7 Australian Army personnel killed when their aircraft went down during a violent electrical storm on a flight from Darwin to Brisbane. The catastrophic plane crash occurred near Rolleston on November the 16th, 1943 during World War II. The memorial includes 2 engines from the plane, parts of the wing and some of the undercarriage. The trip into Carnarvon was stunning. We passed through a couple of properties along the way where we got to see some of the cattle in the area, not only the big boar pig that had been watering across the road at one place, or the mob of weaners camped in the corner of a paddock. Not only was I surprised by the amount of dry feed, but also the amount of green feed being used to fatten the cattle. I was amazed by the bulls that were nearly as wide as they were high, and I had difficulty seeing some of them in the feed. We passed through the large, well-developed Rewan property that AA Company had taken on a 10-year lease agreement of in 2019. The 17,500 hectare property is mostly highly productive improved brigalow country sown to buffalo and is used for backgrounding and growing Wagyu cattle before feedlot entry. In mid-1909, Rewan Station was resumed from the neighbouring Consuelo leasehold and was once a 43,706 hectare horse stud, breeding police horses, with Rewan proclaimed as a stud farm in April 1909. At its largest, the reserve was home to up to 771 horses and up to 2,850 cattle, until its closure in 1934, giving reasons as inaccessibility and the unsuitability of the horses for work in the north. There was no mention of the drought between 1926 and 1932 and the fires that devastated the area as having any influence on the decision, but felt the breeding practices had deteriorated. The station was then thrown open for selection, a fascinating piece of history in the area. We also passed through Bandana Station in the foothills of the Carnarvon Ranges, a breeding and backgrounding property spanning 17,477 hectares with a capacity to run between 1,500 and 2,000 breeders. The property has about 4,500 hectares of improved pastures, with about 600 hectares sown to Lucina grown to be used to finish cattle. Bandana Station also operates the sandstone park we were to camp at. Just a side note, my research into the growing of Lucina now states that it is an environmental weed in Queensland, a shift in its suitability from the late 1970s when it was seen as the next best thing for finishing cattle. No matter how many times I tried to take photographs of the ranges, I don't think I captured just how spectacular they were. Driving through the properties was amazing for a country person like me. Rick and I will leave you as we set up camp at Sandstone Park. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Give us a thumbs up if you have. Join us next time as we hike the Gorge to the art gallery and check out the amphitheatre and moss garden on our return. Take care and stay safe. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, living life.